with a lot of people staying at home right now, sheltering in place, they're in their kitchen a lot. So, Danny, talk to us a little bit about the findings that you find in the kitchen that are most common in the home inspection report. You'll probably talk about each and every job you do.
Yeah. Kitchen findings are typically, there's three that stand out every time. Your oven doesn't have an anti-tip device on it, which if you open the oven door, if it's a freestanding oven, you open the oven door and you're going to see a little sticker in there that shows a child crawling up on the door and the oven toppling over on the child. That's been something that's been required since 1991, is having an anti-tip device installed. So when you have an oven delivered and installed, the installers are supposed to, by law, put that in. A lot of people will go to the big box store and buy the oven themselves and bring it home and slide this thing in place after they've hooked up the gas line, and then wonder what this bracket is that's in the bottom warming drawer and just kind of toss it aside. So
it's similar sort of to like the bookshelves, right? Like for the bookshelves, if you have kids, especially if there's an earthquake that we have, the books might topple over or the shelf might topple over. Yeah. So that's why you have a little bracket. And it's similar for the oven.
Very similar, except it won't topple over in an earthquake. It's typically because toddlers like to climb on that door, or if you have a child that is just, a younger child, maybe 4 or 5, is trying to get up to the popcorn that you just popped in the microwave above it or something, they stand on that door to get them height, and then the whole thing topples over. And it has happened, and it's pretty tragic, the results. So we check for the anti-tip device. Again, safety issue, very simple to repair.
It's not something that it's gonna break the bank in that sense, or it's gonna jeopardize the deal. It's relatively simple whether sellers take care of it or not.
I would think so. Typically, I think most of my findings, about 90% of my findings, are typically that way. They're not going to make or break the deal. When we get into if the roof is in bad shape, or there's been some remodel and they didn't properly do the trusses in the attic and things like that, where it gets very, very costly, that's when I think things get questionable. But you see that more than me. But back to the kitchen issues, you got the anti-tip device, which I touched on. And then there's a GFCI outlets. We like to see.
What does GFCI stand for, if you don't mind?
Ground fault circuit interrupt. So that's the plugs that you typically see around the sink that have little buttons on them where you can reset it. There's one that says test and one that says reset. Those are there to protect you from getting shocked. If your hands are wet, or if something splashes out and gets the appliance wet that's next to the sink, it won't arc or spark. It's going to trip that GFCI and kill the power at that point. It used to be those were required within 6 feet of the sink. Today, your GFCI protection is required throughout the entire kitchen, on every countertop outlet and on the islands. So we're checking for that. Now, in a home that was built in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we're not going to find typically that every outlet is GFCI protected. So it's not really a defect, but I'm still letting you know that you may want to update it to meet current standards, because it's just a safety thing. So that's probably the second most common thing, maybe the first.
Then there's another thing that I didn't think about, but an air gap and a dishwasher. Can you talk to us a little bit about that too?
Yeah, the old air gap. So when you're standing at the sink, in most cases you'll find at the back of the sink, there's a chrome knob back there just kind of hanging out. Nobody knows what it's for. It has a little hole in it. It's just kind of ugly and unsightly. That's actually very important. That's part of your dishwasher draining system. It's called an air gap. So when you run your dishwasher and it hits the drain cycle, the dirty water is going to run down under the sink up to that air gap, up into a pipe, and then it has to jump a gap, which is the air gap, to get down and drain down to your garbage disposal, typically, if you have a garbage disposal, or into just a drain line. The purpose of it is to keep debris and sewage backup and things from like that nature from migrating back into your dishwasher, which is a sanitary environment. So if you're running food down your garbage disposal, which we all do, that food's getting chopped up and spun around, and it's going into the port where the dishwasher drain line plugs into. So it's sort of getting direct injected into that dishwasher drain line. And if you do that long enough, it's going to migrate back into the dishwasher. The air gap is a high point.
Which is absolutely gross. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but it's just like, wait a second.
It's
I don't.
disgusting.
A lot of times you want to use the hand pump like you're talking about. Do you rather have soap instead of a little air gap? Because
Yeah.
who actually uses it, or when does it actually work or function? But
Yeah.
recently, it functioned for us, and we're like, oh wow, things spit out when we actually just cleaned it. It's crazy.
Yeah, so that's one of the signs that you have an issue. If you run your dishwasher and you see water coming out of the air gap and dripping into the sink, you know that the drain line is plugged at the garbage disposal and you want to get that cleaned. And if you've ever done that, you know it's very smelly and gross.
Right. But at the same time, it's good for buyers to know that if there isn't one, that they would need to install it. So that might look like
Yeah.
maybe creating a hole in the countertop, changing out the countertop, or it could be a
Depending
different
on-
solution that contractors have.
Yeah, there's some easy ones where there's already a hole in the sink with a plug and you just pop the plug and throw your air gap in there. Or maybe you have a soap dispenser that's in the sink. I always recommend replacing it with the air gap and get rid of that soap dispenser because they're always empty and they're kind of hard to deal with. Or you may have an under counter sink with granite countertops and people think, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? There's
Right.
granite, it's stone. Well, it's
Yeah.
pretty simple.
You don't want to damage it.
Anybody familiar with tile work can drill a hole in that granite and throw in that $12 air gap.